Randy Edsall survive at Maryland. Next. Welcome to the Stan Simpson Show, a program about Connecticut people and compelling issues. Make it a point to drop in every week. If Randy Edsall had a crystal ball, he would likely still be at UConn. He built a respectable Division I program at Stores, beat Notre Dame in South Bend, went to bowl games, graduated his students, and sent players to the pros. But things have not been so rosy at Maryland in year one. The Terps had a 2-10 record and lost 7 in a row. Many in College Park have already lost patience with Edsall. One prominent columnist has already called for him to be fired. Hartford Courant sports columnist Jeff Jacobs and WTIC sportscaster Scott Gray are in studio to discuss Edsall's uninspiring start at his new job. In our second segment, we'll talk about the evolving child molestation scandals at Syracuse and Penn State. Just how pervasive is this kind of thing in college athletics? Then we'll wrap things up with some thoughts about presidential politics. University of Hartford professor Bilal Sakud joins us. But first, we'll talk about why some are electing to say that Randy Edsall must go. You like that, guys? It's a nice little segue. Electing politics. Jeff Jacobs, Scott Gray.
You write these things yourself?
Yeah, I write it myself. You can tell, right? Yeah. So listen, you've got a column this week where you blast Randy Edsall and just expose him. You call him, pretty much paraphrasing, a thin-skinned, micromanaging egomaniac.
Tom Coughlin with a smile. That's what I put it in.
But yours. 1 year calling for his head. Come on, Jake. This is too early for that.
Oh, I don't think he will be fired. John Feinstein of the Washington Post already did.
Disagrees, right?
Yeah, I think that Randy will learn a valuable lesson this year, and it's a lesson that he can't take back, and that's one: you don't come down to somebody else's house in the first year and take all somebody else's kids and decide you're going to be chief petty officer. And
well, why not, though? Because, and Scott Green chime in, it's his house now, Jeff Jacobs. They paid him $10 million over 5 years. He owns the house now.
Yeah, and he firmly believed that, didn't he? Well, I'm a believer you're going to be a successful manager of people. You kind of, it's more nuanced and a little more feathered than that. And Randy Edsall is best at building. He's a builder. And he should have been, and he's systematic. As I said in my column, that some people have a success pyramid. He builds pyramids. He's a slow aircraft carrier. And he came in there, and we probably allowed it too much in the last few years here. It's like, he's a bad man. He's not really a bad man. He's a CEO. And if he acted more like a CEO and less like a dictator, he will be more successful.
You agree, Scott Gray?
Well, I agree with everything that Jeff said. And actually, I did a commentary this week as well that, a lot of the points that Jeff made, I also made, and a number of things that we agreed on. And like Jeff said, Randy's a CEO. He is a good builder. We all know the job that could have probably been a perfect fit for him is now open. Penn State, as a result of what's happened in Maryland, he's not going to find himself on the short list for that job. One of the things about Randy is very much about Randy. And he comes in, it's his house now. He should take full ownership of the house. And unfortunately, he kind of threw the previous coach under the bus, which didn't set well with a lot of the players. He's got a lot of players that are already not only talking about, but, making preparations to transfer out of the program. Every time people brought up the problems within the program, why the program is struggling, he would use phrases like the well-documented problems that exist in the program. Obvious references to some of the things that happened under Frigian. There were the 3 scholarships that they lost for APR, failure to meet the APR standards, loss of playing or practice time, which was a school-mandated issue over some minor violations.
Let me ask you, though, his personality. Yeah. I'm going to take devil's advocate here. It seems to me that Randy Edsall's personality gets in the way of people recognizing his accomplishments. Let me go back to UConn for a minute. And my brother's a UConn alum. I've had this argument with him for months now. Randy Edsall did, I thought, the impossible at UConn. I mean, you look at the resume, forget about the compiled overall record. He beat Notre Dame in South Bend, Stop right there. If that was all he did in his 10 years
they
there.
They ranks, Stan.
No, but
we're not living in 1960s.
This isn't your father's name,
The excuses come out.
There's a lot of tarnish on
He
that.
never beat it.
Who would have thought that at UConn, I don't care what end he had, to beat him in South Bend was a major accomplishment for that program.
It was a nice accomplishment.
Yeah, I'd like to point out, I think that that goes back to the argument of him being a builder.
Yep.
And this is where I think he got away from it, because I want to give a lot of credit to Luke Perkins and the school and the commitment they made. $150 million, including $90 million in the state, for the build of the stadium. But there's an awful lot of money and an awful lot of elbow grease that went into the building. Randy, as part of it, absolutely. Dan Orlovsky stayed home, huge part of it player-wise. And I saw it as kind of a three-pronged thing. In recent years, it became all about Randy, all about Randy. And from the building part, he was only part of it.
I would argue a big part of it. I would argue a big part of it.
Yes,
you know what? I'll go a little bit further than what Jeff said. He said in recent years it became all about Randy.
Right.
I think in recent years it became more noticeable that it was all about Randy. Randy Edsall came into a perfect situation for Randy Edsall here at UConn. He took over a program that was still Division I AA. He really didn't have a lot to sell. He had one product to sell at that time, and that was Randy Edsall. And he did a good job of selling Randy Edsall, but as the product itself became more sellable, he never changed the product that he was selling. It stayed way too much about Randy Edsall.
And I would say, okay, he has a big ego, I'll concede that. And I say, so what? He's got a big ego, so does Calhoun, so does Gino. Name me a big-time coach. Let me finish my points here. You get to a BCS Bowl, which, again, look at UConn, where they came from. Important. He graduated his students. Very important. The kids graduate. He sent guys to the pros from UConn. You got a bevy of guys out there in the pros. So to me, here's a guy who, if you're a UConn fan, you should be, I think when they look back, they'll say the best era in football for UConn was under Randy Edsall. I think he was largely underappreciated here, and I think he also didn't appreciate what he had in UConn. So
great accomplishments at UConn, because these things had never been done at UConn before. He's in a different situation at Maryland. Maryland's been there, done that. They're looking for something more.
He going to survive?
This year he will. I'll tell you what, though, empty seats, and they're looking at cutting 8 varsity sports. If the money goes and the fannies go out of the seats, that's going to chase him maybe even faster than the losses.
Do you guys agree, though, had he stayed at UConn and say they continued the pace they were on when he was there with the Penn State scandal, I hear you guys saying that Penn State would have been a better fit for him because there was a rebuilding program from a morality standpoint. Is that fair to say that he would have been better fit there?
Right. I thought that's a place that put high value on academics and really the steady hand. He's a steady hand. We're concentrating a lot on his personality, but in his accomplishments, he's a steady hand. And I think Penn State, you know, as they showed, that we always thought that that's what they valued above all was a steady hand. And I think that the white uniforms, and if he could have continued to get the kind of kids that he wanted to get there and get them at a higher level at Penn State than at UConn. And that's a problem. The question we yet to be answered, Stan, here is, well, you're just throwing accolades on Randy, is that he never beat a team that finished the season in the top 25. He beat one top 25 team ever. He's like 1 in 19. But if he got those players at Penn State, the higher athletes, do I think that he could have done a job there? I think that's the kind of person they were looking for.
Well, what were the goals? What were the goals and expectations with Randy Edsall or Jeff Jacobs to come in to change UConn from a Division I to big-time AA? You know, if you said, listen, you're the BCS, send guys to the pros, graduate, we would all say, you know what, fine, do that, and that's success. And now we're getting into whether he beat ranked teams, whether he beat Notre Dame at home. I think we're quibbling here. I think the goal was to turn UConn into a recognized force, and force is a hard word, in football. He did that. He put them on the map. To me, he did his job.
I'll tell you what, he had the benefit of being in a very weak BCS league. Being in the Big East.
More excuses, though. You guys give him excuses for the BCS, excuses for Notre Dame.
Let's talk about
Come on now.
Hey, the dude went to Maryland. He's 2-10, Stan. What is he, Vince Lombardi for crying out loud?
That's a great start over here.
The subject that Jeff was talking about, why he'd be a great fit at Penn State, because they really need that kind of hand right now. And there were incidents at UConn where Randy demonstrated why he would be a good fit in a situation that needs that kind of hand right. Getting the program through the Jasper Howard incident, for instance, and beyond his own rules where 1 through 10 you had to, but there were incidents where he had to discipline players. And I think he handled a lot of those separate incidents well. I think it was those separate things rather than the everyday Randy Edsall regime of running a football program. It was the separate incidents that came up, the way he handled those and distinguished himself. I think that would make him a good fit with a place like Penn State.
Let's continue this in the second segment. They're running me out of here in the first segment. Great conversation, guys. We're going to come back with more of Jeff Jacobs and Scott Gray. We'll talk about Randy Edsall and what's happening at Penn State and Syracuse. Is there more to come? Should more heads roll there? You're watching the Stan Simpson Show. Join us on Facebook and Twitter, too.